Okay, yesterday we didn't learn for technical reasons, but back to where we left off. Okay, the next din in the laws of marriage and all that stuff is there's certain women that a Cohen is not allowed to marry. A Cohen has unique kedusha, as the Torah says. So basically the Torah says a number of women that the Torah says what they are, that a Cohen is not allowed to marry. And if most of these, even if he does marry them, let's say by mistake or whatever, they cannot stay married, they have to divorce. So who is he forbidden to marry? A gerusha, a woman who's divorced. Zaina by definition does not mean here a prostitute. It means a woman who had relations with somebody she would not be allowed to marry. That means if a woman had relations even once, after the age of 3, she had relations, let's say, once with a non-Jew, because she's not allowed to marry the non-Jew, so therefore that disqualifies her from being able to marry a Cohen. If she had any relations that she had which would be forbidden for her to have relations with, so then that automatically disqualifies her from marrying a Cohen. But what happens if a woman had relations with another Jew? You know, a single girl had relations with another Jew. So because she technically would be allowed to marry him, so that wouldn't disqualify her as a Zaina. No, because the Zaina is only somebody, the expression in the Gemara, Misha Nivala, Lemisha Asala. If she had relations with somebody that she wouldn't be allowed to marry. This guy technically should be, but if it was, let's say, incest of some sort with a person she wouldn't be allowed to marry, so then she wouldn't be able to marry a Kohen. Let's say she had relations with a cousin, because technically you're allowed to marry a cousin, so that would not render her the concept of a Zaina. The next category is Chalala. Chalala is a daughter of a marriage of a Kohen with a woman he wasn't allowed to marry. Meaning like this, if a Kohen married a divorcee, and they had a daughter, that daughter, even though she's a kosher 100% Jewish girl, but because it's a child of a Kohen with a forbidden relations, somebody is not allowed to marry, so that girl would be Chalala, she would not be allowed to marry a Kohen. Who? No, as far as, besides marrying a Kohen, she's equal to every other Jew. It's just as a certain kedusha. The Torah says, "Isha zaina v'chalala lo yikachu." In fact, there's a family, a very famous Vaad family is called Azulai. It's a very well-known family. They're not all related necessarily, but I heard that Azulai originally were Kohanim. How did they get the name Azulai? Because it's an acronym for Isha, Zona, V'chalala. Lo Yikachu. So that's where they got the name. That's what I was told once. That's where they got the name Azulai. Isha Zona V'chalala Lo Yikachu, which is an acronym for Azulai. It's interesting.
They used to be Cohen?
I don't know. Okay, now another thing is, this is rabbinically forbidden. If a woman, let's say a guy died without kids, so there's a mitzvah of yibum, the brother is supposed to marry that woman. Today we don't do it, so they do what's called chalitza. In order for this woman, a widow whose husband died without children, so in order for her to remarry, if there's a brother, she has to get what's called chalitza. Take off the shoe, the spitting, the whole process with the shoe. So a chalutza is rabbinically forbidden to marry a kohen. It's not biblical, it's rabbinic. That she's not allowed to marry a Kohen. Now, another interesting thing, there's certain marriages that a Kohen can't marry, but if they got married, they don't have to divorce. In Zachatchila, you don't do that. For instance, in the Gemara in Kedushin, it says that then, there's an old argument in the Gemara, if a ger marries a girl, a convert marries a Jewish girl and has a kid, or a converted woman marries a regular Jew, can that kid marry a Kohen? His argument, some opinions say no. The halacha is that they could, unless if both parents are converts. If both parents are converts, there's a chumrah that Kohenim accepted upon themselves. The Gemara says that they don't marry a Kohen. But if they got married, let's say whatever, the rabbi wasn't aware or whatever, if something happened, they got married, then they don't have to divorce. Because it's only a chumrah. It's not halachically, the halacha, the Gemara says, is like the ruling, the children of a ger, even a ger and a geyeris, both converts, is allowed to, the girl can marry a kohen. There's another thing, which is also, and this is only lachatchila, not b'diavad, and that is a girl whose father is not Jewish. It's called a blemish, a pagam, and therefore they should not marry a kohen. But if they got married to the kohen, so then they don't have to do it, they can stay married. What? In which case?
This case you just said. The grandfather of the boy on his mother's side is not Jewish, but his father is Kohen.
Yeah, so the kid's kohen.
Is it Kohen?
Yeah, it's not a cholol. There's also Garen Geyeris that had a kid, a girl, and they married a kohen. Those kids are kohanim, yeah. It's just a chumrah lachatchila. They don't they get married, but if they got married, it's a kosher wedding, and the kids are kohanim.
In the last year, you were discussing that a mamzer can marry a
A mamzer could marry a geyeris.
Are there children in mamzer?
Yeah, that's why the Gemara says you don't do it, because all you're doing is marbe mamzerim. But what happens technically if it's an older mamzer, let's say, that wants to marry an older geyeris that can't have kids, past age-bearing kids, right? Or for other reasons, she has hysterectomy. I mean, whatever the reason that she can't have kids, technically the ger could marry her. I don't know if they do it today, but according to halacha, there's no reason why they can't get married, because a ger is allowed to marry a mamzer is allowed to marry a geyeris, a Jewish convert, but you don't do it because the kids are mamzerim. All you're doing is multiplying mamzerim. But if they're not going to have any kids, they can't have kids, so then technically they could do it. What?
I can't help but wonder that if you're born a mamzer, then in some essence you have a certain tikkun that is not even up to you, that you can't control, and you can't fulfill the number one mitzvah in the Torah. So how does that work?
The same God that says pru or vu, to be fruitful multiply, says a mamzer can't get married. Obviously, let's speak from a little deeper perspective, from a Chassidic perspective. It's not the mamzer's fault that he's a mamzer. I mean, he didn't do anything wrong, his parents did something wrong. Nevertheless, as we find the beginning of Chumash, Adam and Chava sinned, until today we suffer. The punishment of childbearing pain and having to work to make a living and all that. That's all an offshoot of the Chatei Tzadas, right? Now, Adam and Chava sin, why should we, our young generations, we are after them, why are we suffering from that? So you see that the responsibility is ongoing. It's not, it's me. There's no me. It's like it says when Cain killed Hevel, it says the bloods of your brother, because he didn't kill Hevel. He killed Hevel and his potential children and grandchildren for all generations. So that aspect is. Now, if Hashem made this mamzer, this neshama come down into a body of a mamzer, again, it's not his fault, so he didn't do anything wrong. Obviously, his mission of what Hashem wants from him in the world is not to get married. That's not his mission. His mission is to do everything else. In fact, the Mishnah says that a Talmud Chacham, even if he's a mamzer, has precedence over a Kohen Gadol who's an illiterate. Now, we don't paskin like that today in a practical sense. But according to halacha, you give a Kohen first aliyah, yeah? But the Gemara says that's only if a Kohen's a scholar. If a Kohen's an Amoretz and a Talmud Chacham, let's say, according to, again, halachos, we don't do it today, because then you start, who's biggest scholar, we're getting into fights. So this is the accepted tradition, Cohen goes first. But what happens, technically, if you have a choice in the shul, I'm talking Talmudical time, yeah? A guy walks into shul, he's a Cohen, but he's an illiterate, and they have another scholar. Who do you give the aliyah to? Halachically, the Mishnah says you give it to the Talmud Chacham. The Gemara says even more. A Talmud Chacham was a mamzer, comes before as precedent even of a Kohen Gadol, but he's an illiterate. And they learn it out from the pasuk. Yekarehi mipninim. There's a pasuk. It's more. Torah is more precious than pearls. And the Gemara says Yekarehi. It's the Torah is even greater mipninim from the Kohen Gadol that goes lifnaim v'lifnim. He goes inside the Holy of Holies. Yekarehi Torah is even greater than that. But again, like I said, today it's not done. So obviously, the mamzer's role in life is obviously his neshama's function, purpose, mission is not to get married, because that's what Hashem. It's not his fault, So that's what it was.
Rabbi, if the mamzer marries a boy, then it's not a mamzer.
Mamzer, the kid's a guy.
Yeah. So what's wrong with that?
You can't give, all you to create is you're creating goyim. But technically, you're not allowed to do this, okay? Because you're not allowed to marry a non-Jewish woman, okay? Now, what happens technically for mamzer, again, you're not allowed to do it, I'm making it clear, you're not allowed to do it. What happens if a mamzer marries a shiksa, a non-Jewish girl, and they have a child, so the kid's a guy, and then they convert. That kid's not a mamzer. It's a newborn baby. But that's not an eitzah, it's not an advice how to do it, because you're not allowed to marry a non-Jewish woman, period.
The kid may not convert.
No, I understand. I'm going to say, technically, if they had such a kid, a guy, and the kid decides one day to convert, he's not a mamzer. Huh? Yeah, but again, their children will be mamzedim, so all you're doing is multiplying mamzedim. Or technically, again, what happens if a mamzer who can't have kids, and a mamzeres, a female mamzer who can't have kids? Okay, a 70-year-old mamzer wants to marry a 70-year-old mamzeres. She's not having any kids. Technically, they're allowed to get married. Again, I don't know if they do it today, but, because maybe they'll have a baby at 90, like Sarah had in last week's Parsha, you know what I mean? Or in this week's, it's coming this week's Parsha. Okay, another din is like this. We'll just start it. If a woman, okay, I'll say the din and tomorrow we'll explain it. If a woman got divorced, or widowed, or converted, she's not allowed to get married for 92 days. I'm not saying it's not done today, but it's a big, big halachic issue how they allow that to happen when it's a clear din in the Gemara. You're not allowed to do it. And anyway, so there's a din, because why? Because a woman can give birth, according to the Torah, after 6 months or after 9 months. So, after 7 months, after 6 months or 9 months. So now, let's say a woman got divorced, and a month later she got married to somebody else, and she got pregnant. So now the question, whose kid is that? It might be born 6 months later, but it could be 9 months in the first, so there's a very, very important thing about that. Okay. No.